After years of living under our HOA's iron fist, they finally crossed the line by raising my fees just because I had too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly buying up properties in the neighborhood for years. Now, it was time to show Barbara Lewis, our power-hungry HOA president, who really owned this community. But would she accept defeat gracefully when I revealed my secret? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more HOA and power-tripping president stories. I never wanted trouble with our HOA. I really didn't. But when I found that bright orange notice taped to my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this was war. My hands were shaking as I read it. Immediate fee increase, $500 monthly. Violation, excessive vehicles on property. 3 cars. That's what this was about. My work truck, which I needed for my construction business. My wife's SUV for her hospital shifts. And the used Honda we had just bought for our daughter's 16th birthday last month. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. I watched through my kitchen window as Barbara Lewis, our HOA president, did her morning inspection walk with her little pink clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures again. This was the 3rd time this week. Honey, she's out there again. My wife, Sarah, called from the living room. Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage. No, I said firmly, pouring my coffee. We're not hiding our daughter's car like we're doing something wrong. The garage was full. Sarah's medical supplies and my work equipment took up all the space. We had explained that at the last HOA meeting. I could still remember how Barbara had smirked when I tried to explain our situation. Rules are rules, Mr. Mitchell, she had said, not even looking up from her phone. Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you. What Barbara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been quietly buying up properties in our development for the past 5 years through my real estate investment company. Every time a house went up for sale, I made sure to use different LLC names for the purchases. At first, it had just been a smart investment strategy, but now, it had become something much bigger. I walked outside to get the mail, purposely taking my time. Barbara pretended to inspect Mrs. Jenkins's flower beds while watching me from the corner of her eye. Poor Mrs. Jenkins had been fined last month for planting daisies instead of HOA-approved tulips. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Property closing complete. You now own 67% of the development. I smiled, tucking my phone away as Barbara power walked toward me, clipboard clutched to her chest. Mr. Mitchell, she called out, her voice sickly sweet. I trust you received our notice about the vehicle violation? I did, Barbara. And I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase. I kept my voice calm and professional. She waved her hand dismissively. The board has full authority to implement fees as needed. Perhaps if you attended more meetings, you'd understand how these things work. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Little did she know, I had attended every single meeting for the past 5 years, through proxy representatives who owned the other houses. I had sat back and documented every one of Barbara's selective enforcements, every questionable fee, every abuse of power. As she turned to leave, her designer heels clicking on the sidewalk, she called over her shoulder. Oh, and the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight at 7 p.m. sharp. We'll be discussing additional measures regarding problem properties. I watched her walk away, then pulled out my phone again to text my lawyer. Time to prepare those documents we discussed. Barbara's making her move tonight. That evening, I walked into the HOA meeting with a thick folder in hand. The board members sat at their usual spots, with Barbara at the head of the table, her expression smug. She was expecting me to argue. She was expecting me to fight an uphill battle. She wasn't expecting what I had planned. As the meeting began, Barbara wasted no time. We're here to discuss new enforcement policies and additional fines for ongoing violations. Actually, I interrupted, setting my folder down. I'd like to discuss something first. Barbara's eyes narrowed. Mr. Mitchell, homeowners need to request speaking time in advance. I smiled. I think I qualify for an exception. I slid the first document across the table. This is proof that I now own 67% of the properties in this development. The room went silent. Barbara blinked. That's not possible. Oh, it is. Every property purchase was done legally through separate LLCs. And as the majority property owner, I am now entitled to call for a vote to remove the current HOA leadership. Barbara's face went pale. I turned to the other board members. Effective immediately, I motioned for a vote of no confidence in Barbara Lewis as HOA president. The silence was deafening. Then, one by one, hands began to rise. Barbara shot up from her seat. "You can't do this." "Oh, I can." And I just did. I leaned back. "Barbara, it's over." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She looked around the room, but no one was coming to her defense. The same people she had bullied, fined, and harassed over the years were done with her. That night, Barbara Lewis lost everything, and I finally got my neighborhood back. I pulled into the driveway just as Barbara Lewis, our HOA president, stopped to take more photos. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Tonight would change everything in Lakeside Meadows. But first, I had some calls to make. I went inside and spread out the property maps on my desk, each lot carefully highlighted and coded. 5 years of careful planning, collecting evidence, and watching Barbara's reign of HOA terror grow worse. Tonight, she would learn that her biggest mistake wasn't just targeting my family. It was underestimating exactly who she was dealing with. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson from across the street, crying about another violation notice. As I listened to her story, I glanced at the framed photo on my wall. My father, standing proudly in front of his first house before an HOA's harassment had forced him to sell at a loss 20 years ago. Dad had taught me to play the long game, to fight smart instead of angry. I looked at my watch, 6 hours until the meeting. Barbara wanted to play hardball over a few cars in a driveway. She had no idea what was coming. I walked into the Lakeside Meadows Community Center's meeting room and immediately felt the tension. Every seat was filled with neighbors I'd known for years, sitting shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves. Barbara had really outdone herself this time. She'd even hired a professional photographer to take pictures of my driveway from different angles, making 3 normal-sized cars look like some kind of illegal parking lot. "Let's begin," Barbara announced, tapping her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She had called this emergency meeting on a Tuesday evening, knowing full well that most working families would struggle to attend. But I had made sure to be there, sitting quietly in the back row, watching her put on her usual show. "As you can see from these professional photographs," she began, clicking through her PowerPoint presentation, "Mr. Mitchell's property has become a used car lot." A few gasps came from her loyal followers in the front row, the same ones whose Christmas decorations stayed up until March without any fines. I glanced around the room, noting how Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd been fined last month for having her grandson's car in her driveway while he helped repair her roof. Mr. Chun, the high school science teacher, was furiously taking notes. He'd received a violation notice for parking his car slightly over his own driveway line during the last snowstorm. Barbara clicked to the next slide, showing a zoomed-in photo of my daughter's car. "This vehicle here has been parked in the same spot for over 48 hours, she declared. She failed to mention it was because my daughter was home from college for the weekend. The meeting dragged on as Barbara presented her so-called evidence. Charts showing supposed property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, probably her friends, and even weather reports suggesting my cars were creating excess snowdrifts on the street. Furthermore, she continued, pulling out a thick binder, I have documented every instance of vehicles entering and leaving Mr. Mitchell's property over the past 3 months. My eyebrows shot up. She'd been tracking my family's movements? Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's when Sarah Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, stood up. Barbara, isn't this a bit excessive? They're just regular cars in a regular driveway. Barbara's face reddened as she snapped. You're out of order. You haven't been recognized by the chair. I watched as Barbara's husband, Mark, started handing out copies of a new proposed bylaw, one that would limit each household to 2 vehicles and require garage parking only. The absurdity of it all almost made me laugh. Almost. We'll now vote on the new vehicle restrictions and fee increase, Barbara declared, not even bothering to allow discussion. All in favor. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. Point of order, Madam President. Barbara's eyes narrowed as she looked at me over her reading glasses. You're not recognized, Mr. Mitchell. Actually, I said, pulling out my own folder. According to HOA Bylaw Section 73, any property owner holding a majority share of the development may call for an immediate board review. Barbara frowned. What are you talking about? I turned toward the room. For the past 5 years, I've been acquiring properties in Lakeside Meadows through my real estate investment firm. As of this afternoon, I now own 67% of the development. A stunned silence filled the room. This means, I continued, effective immediately, I am calling for a board review of HOA leadership, financial practices, and policy enforcement. Barbara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't do this," she finally shrieked. "Oh, but I can," I said calmly. "And I will." The murmurs in the room grew louder as neighbors exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others smug. The same people Barbara had bullied for years now realized the tides had turned. "As of now," I said, "all unfair vehicle restrictions and excessive fines are suspended. And, Barbara, I'd recommend preparing your financial records, because the board will be conducting a full audit." Barbara's face turned pale. "This meeting is adjourned," I said, picking up the pink gavel from the podium and handing it to my lawyer. The neighborhood would never be the same again. An owner may raise a point of order regarding voting procedures. The room fell silent. I could see Barbara Lewis's perfectly manicured nails gripping the podium tighter. "Before we vote, I believe it's important to review the HOA's current property ownership structure." I started walking toward the front of the room, my shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. "You see, over the past 5 years, Lakeside Properties has been acquiring homes in this development." Barbara's face started to lose its color as I pulled out a large property map. "And as CEO of Lakeside Properties, I thought it might interest everyone to know exactly who owns the majority of this HOA." I paused, making eye contact with each board member. "But perhaps we should discuss that after we review these questionable surveillance activities you've been conducting." The room erupted in murmurs. Through my peripheral vision, I saw phones coming out, neighbors recording every moment. Barbara's hand trembled as she reached for her water bottle, knocking over her precious gavel in the process. That's when her husband, Robert, rushed to the podium, whispering something in her ear. Her eyes widened as she finally realized who she had been dealing with all these years. The meeting room fell silent. My heart was pounding, but my voice remained steady. Barbara's smug smile started to fade as I pulled out my leather briefcase. "Before we vote on these new fees," I said, "I have something important to share with everyone." I clicked open my briefcase and removed a thick stack of property deeds, laying them one by one on the table. Each paper represented another piece of my secret plan coming together. The room buzzed with whispers as I arranged them in neat rows. "For the past 5 years," I continued, "I've watched this HOA board ignore serious maintenance issues while harassing good neighbors over minor infractions. I've seen Barbara here write up Mrs. Johnson, who is 82 years old, for having a flower pot that was 1 inch too tall, while her friend Victoria's bright purple fence somehow never got a single warning." Barbara's face turned red. "That's not true. I enforce all rules fairly." She grabbed her water bottle, but her hand was shaking so much she spilled some on her designer blouse. I pulled up photos on the meeting room's big screen. Here's Barbara measuring my grass at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. The security camera footage was crystal clear. Several people gasped. And here she is ignoring the Bennett's violations completely, right after they hired her son's landscaping company. More whispers filled the room. I could see people starting to nod, remembering their own run-ins with Barbara's selective enforcement. "But the most interesting thing I discovered," I said, picking up the stack of deeds, "is that through my company, Lakeside Properties, I now own 67% of the homes in this development." I paused as the meaning sank in. "That makes me the majority owner of the HOA itself." Barbara jumped up, knocking over her chair. "You can't do that. It's not allowed." Her voice had gone squeaky with panic. I smiled calmly. "Actually, I can. I've had 3 different law firms review everything. It's completely legal." I pulled out another folder. "I also have signed complaints from 32 residents about harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious fees." The room erupted. Mrs. Johnson stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "Last winter, they fined me $200 for not shoveling my walkway fast enough. I was in the hospital with pneumonia." Others joined in, sharing their stories. Barbara tried to restore order, banging her gavel, but nobody was listening to her anymore. "I moved to dissolve the current board," I announced. "We'll hold new elections with term limits and clear rules about conflict of interest. No more 3 a.m. grass measuring. No more selective enforcement." Nathan Brooks from 2 doors down raised his hand. I second that motion. Soon, hands were going up all around the room. Barbara grabbed her designer purse and started toward the door. This meeting is adjourned, she yelled. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Actually, I said, still calm. According to HOA bylaws section 7. You need a majority vote to adjourn, and I don't think you have that anymore. I gestured at the deeds spread across the table. We're just getting started. Barbara Lewis froze with her hand on the doorknob, realizing her power was slipping away. 20 years of ruling Lakeside Meadows with an iron fist were coming to an end. Now, I continued, opening another folder. Let's talk about those mysterious pool renovation fees from last summer. The ones where $50,000 disappeared, but the pool never got fixed. I pulled out a series of bank statements. I have some very interesting financial records to share. Barbara slumped against the wall, her face pale. She hadn't noticed yet, but a local news van had just pulled into the parking lot. I had invited them to cover our community reorganization meeting. The next few hours would change our neighborhood forever. But first, we had years of Barbara's secrets to uncover, and I had every single receipt. My careful planning was finally paying off, and the best part was still to come. On Monday morning, I walked into my lawyer's office to find 20 angry voicemails from Barbara. She had discovered my company's property records over the weekend and was threatening to sue me for secretly trying to take over the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She had finally shown her true colors. But Barbara wasn't just angry, she was scared. That evening, she went door to door, spreading rumors that I planned to turn our peaceful suburb into a parking lot for my supposed car collection. Some neighbors actually believed her, especially after she produced fake documents suggesting I had connections to a shady development company. I knew I had to act fast. My security cameras caught Barbara sneaking onto my property at midnight, taking close-up photos of my car's license plates. The next day, she filed a lawsuit claiming I had broken HOA rules by buying properties through my company. She even tried to get an emergency court order to freeze my voting rights in the HOA. That's when my months of preparation paid off. My lawyer revealed our secret weapon, a detailed record of every HOA meeting for the past 5 years. We had videos showing Barbara giving her friends passes on their violations while harshly fining others. We had copies of checks proving she had used HOA funds to renovate her own backyard. Best of all, we had emails where she bragged about using her power to keep undesirable elements out of the neighborhood. The judge's eyes widened with each piece of evidence. Barbara's face turned red when we showed time-stamped footage of her measuring my lawn with a ruler at 3 a.m., taking photos of my teenage son's car, and placing threatening notes on my neighbor's doors. Her lawyer started sweating when we presented proof that she had altered HOA records to hide her friends' unpaid dues. But the real shock came when 3 former board members stepped forward. They testified about how Barbara had bullied them into approving unfair rules, admitted to targeting specific homeowners she didn't like, and even bragged about using HOA fines to fund her yearly trips to Hawaii. The courtroom went silent when we displayed Barbara's social media posts mocking elderly residents who couldn't pay their HOA fees. There she was, posting poolside photos from Maui with the caption, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this vacation. Keep those violations coming." Barbara tried to defend herself, claiming she was just doing her job, but then we played the recording from last month's HOA meeting, where she had screamed at Mrs. Dawson, our 75-year-old neighbor, for having a bird feeder that was 2 inches too low. That's when Barbara finally lost it. She jumped up from her seat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's trying to destroy our perfect neighborhood," she shrieked. "Do you know what kind of people will move in if we don't have strict rules? He probably wants to turn this into one of those communities where people can park wherever they want." The judge had heard enough. He not only dismissed Barbara's lawsuit, but also ordered a full audit of HOA finances. A month later, Barbara resigned in disgrace, and Lakeside Meadows held its first fair election in decades. No more selective enforcement, no more hidden fees, and no more Barbara Lewis. A full audit of the HOA's finances was finally underway. As we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed with notifications. Neighbors had received a mass email from Barbara Lewis announcing her immediate resignation from the board. She claimed she was being forced out by outside influences, but the truth was clear. Her reign over Lakeside Meadows was ending. I watched her storm to her car, furiously typing on her phone. This wasn't over. Barbara still had loyal supporters in the neighborhood, and she wasn't one to go down without a fight. But for now, I had what I needed: undeniable proof that our HOA president had abused her power for years, and the legal authority to make real changes. The morning of the final court hearing brought an unexpected surprise. Barbara had sent a swarm of news vans to my house, hoping public pressure would force me to back down. Instead, she had given me the perfect opportunity. I straightened my tie, grabbed my documents, and stepped outside with a confident smile. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Mitchell, and I'd love to share something interesting about our HOA's financial records." I pulled out the color-coded spreadsheets my accountant had prepared, detailing years of suspicious fees that always seemed to benefit Barbara's closest friends. The reporters leaned in as I explained how single parents had been fined at higher rates than her golf buddies. One journalist gasped when I showed security footage of Barbara measuring my grass at 3 a.m., even though her own yard violated multiple HOA rules. Inside the courthouse, Barbara sat beside her high-priced lawyer, wearing her signature faux pearl necklace and a smug smile. That smile vanished when my attorney began presenting evidence. We displayed photos of Barbara's own home violating HOA rules, her bright red front door, her overgrown garden, and her son's 4 cars parked illegally on the street. The judge's interest peaked when we unveiled screenshots from Barbara's secret Facebook group, where she bragged about targeting certain families. "Let's see how long the Mitchells last with these new fees," she had written. "Maybe they'll finally move and sell to someone more suitable." Barbara shot to her feet, ready to object, but stopped cold when we played an audio recording from last month's HOA meeting. Her voice echoed through the courtroom. "Of course I make up violations. How else can we control who lives here?" The judge's gavel came down hard. Not only was Barbara removed from the HOA board, but she was ordered to repay every unfair fine she had imposed. When she heard the total, $14,789.92, her face drained of color. The victory was even sweeter than I had imagined. With my majority ownership, I led the formation of a new HOA board, one built on fairness. We elected 5 residents from different parts of the neighborhood, including Mrs. Rodriguez, whom Barbara had tried to fine for cooking too much ethnic food, and Mr. Chun, whose beautiful garden Barbara had called too exotic. The changes came fast. Kids could now play basketball in their driveways. Gardens could grow vegetables instead of just ornamental flowers, and families could finally park more than 2 cars as long as they fit in their own space. The neighborhood felt alive again. 3 weeks later, I watched from my front porch as Barbara's moving truck arrived. She had sent a final letter to the community, claiming she was relocating to a higher-class neighborhood with stricter standards. But no one missed the irony. Her new HOA had already slapped a parking violation on her windshield before she even left. That evening, my daughter parked her car in our driveway, right beside my work truck and my wife's SUV. A small sign stood in my front yard, one we had all voted on together. "Welcome to Lakeside Meadows, where good neighbors make great communities." The next morning, I received an unexpected call. A TV producer had seen the news coverage and wanted to make a documentary about how we had transformed our HOA. As I looked out at kids laughing in their yards and neighbors chatting over garden fences, I smiled. Somewhere, Barbara was watching, stuck in her new neighborhood with its absurd 1-car garage rule. And for the first time in years, Lakeside Meadows truly felt like home. The best part? Our property values rose by 15% in the first month after Susan left. Turns out, people prefer living in a neighborhood where they're treated with respect rather than ruled by fear. Some of Susan's old allies even stopped by to apologize, admitting they had been too afraid of becoming her next target. We still have an HOA, but now it works for the community instead of controlling it. Every month, our fees go toward real improvements, upgrading the playground, maintaining the pool, and helping elderly residents with home repairs. In the empty lot where Susan once took pictures of so-called violations, we built a community garden. As I filed away the last of the court documents, my phone buzzed. A message from a resident in Susan's new neighborhood. They were dealing with their own overbearing HOA president and wanted advice. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing others how to stand up for themselves. Standing up for what's right. In life, power often rests in the hands of those who have held it the longest, but that doesn't mean it should go unchecked. The stories of Barbara and Susan show us a valuable lesson. When people unite, even the most controlling figures can be held accountable. For years, these HOA presidents ruled with fear, manipulating rules to benefit themselves while punishing others. But their downfall wasn't caused by anger or revenge. It was the result of patience, preparation, and truth. The homeowners who stood up to them didn't just fight back. They exposed injustice, replaced corruption with fairness, and built a stronger community in the process. This lesson applies beyond neighborhood disputes. Whether dealing with workplace politics, local governance, or even personal relationships, the key to real change is persistence and integrity. Instead of reacting emotionally, gather facts, stay calm, and let the truth speak for itself. Most importantly, these stories remind us that a community thrives when people respect and support one another. Fear and control may work for a time, but fairness and kindness will always build something stronger. Standing up for what's right isn't just about winning. It's about making the world better for everyone.